TopMedTalk.
This is TopMedTalk, the broadcasting arm of EBPOM, Evidence-Based Perioperative Medicine. The EBPOM World Congress is taking place this year between the 7th and the 9th of July at the British Library in London. Check out ebpom.org now.
Well, hello and welcome to TopMedTalk. We are here in Montreal, Canada for the Society for Obstetric Anesthesia and Perinatology. I'm Desiree, Chappell, guest hosting here on TopMedTalk, former editor-in-chief and managing editor of the podcast. They've let me back. So Mike Grocott is joining me as the co-editor-in-chief now of TopMedTalk. Mike, thanks for letting me come back.
Oh, it's a pleasure. You do it so well. And I guess we'd say we should explain why we're having you back, what your new role is. So come on, share.
That's why I had to step away from TopMedTalk. So I have joined Becton Dickinson, BD, APM, Advanced Patient Monitoring, with Monty Mythen, who was former editor-in-chief of TopMedTalk, as their medical science liaison and director of medical affairs. So I decided I'm still doing clinical work, so I'll still remain clinically active, but decided to flex the other side of our world and see if we can continue to make impact for hemodynamic monitoring for patients. So Mike, great meeting so far. I think we're going to hear from our guest in just a little bit about the stats and things like that, but neither one of us practice obstetric anesthesia. But wow, eye-opening and so enlightening.
Absolutely fascinating. Lots of passion and some really interesting discussions this morning. It's been a really good meeting.
More to come from that. But we have someone from the board of directors from SOAP. Dr. Dan Katz is joining us. Dan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
For our listeners, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. So again, Dan Katz, obstetric anesthesiologist. I practice at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City. We're a fairly busy quaternary referral center for obstetric anesthesia. We do somewhere between 7,000 and 8,000 deliveries a year. Most of them are incredibly high risk. So, clinically very, very busy. In terms of what I do for SOAP, I'm the current outgoing annual meeting and live events committee chair. So my committee is charged with organizing and putting on the annual meeting. And then after my tenure, which ends at the end of this meeting, I was just recently elected to be the incoming vice president. So
congratulations.
It'll be a nice change. Thank you. Much appreciated.
Fantastic.
I know you're outgoing, but good opportunity to plug next year's meeting.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would say probably the next two meetings.
Fantastic.
We try to plan in advance as much as we can because the contracting for these things is very, very complicated. It takes so long. But next year's meeting in Palm Springs is already mostly set. It's going to be fantastic.
Okay.
And then the year after that, we're going to be in Puerto Rico. We're still ironing out the final, spot where we're going to be there.
Nice.
But it'll be great because that year is actually going to be our 60th anniversary.
Yes.
So that'll be a really, really big splash meeting. So it's going to be.
So like any good relationship, you go away into the sun for your anniversary.
Yeah, exactly.
And the IRS, the sort of contemporaneous thing with the IRS, is
this
that you doing that as
by happenstance.
Really?
Completely random. Yeah. So when we book our meeting dates, what we do is we look and see what else is on the calendar. And many societies have already booked what their meetings are going to be for 2 years out. So we already booked our dates for 2028, right? Mm-hmm. But then there are a bunch of societies that have not booked their meetings yet. So, it's always a risk that okay, another society is going to put their meeting on the same date as your meeting. This just happened to be a great, great circumstance because I think that our two societies have a decent amount of overlap. Mm-hmm. And because they're so closely located and co-located in Montreal, people are actually going back and forth a lot more than I thought they would.
Yeah, I love it. It works. Well, congratulations on a fantastic meeting. I mean, we're day 2, I guess, into things.
Yes.
Wonderful content from the main stage, breakout sessions and things like that. Some really good stuff. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about how things are going from your perspective?
Sure, yeah. So we have record numbers of attendees at this meeting. I was very excited when we knew, we had over 900 people pre-register for the meeting. That was, a month or so ago. And that had already broken the record that had been, in Denver, which was around 850 or so. And I think we had a decent amount of people do on-site registration. I think we're almost at, 1,100 people, which is absolutely remarkable, which is great because, you look everywhere. If there's people walking around and having discussions and stuff like that. And you're looking at the, where we're doing the breakout sessions and the lectures and there's standing room only.
So much engagement.
There's a real energy.
Our group of people is a very dedicated group. I always say small dedicated group, but now I can't say it's that small anymore. It's a larger dedicated group.
So much enthusiasm. And I think that there's a lot of hot topics in anesthesia right now related to obstetrics. And hopefully the word is finally starting to get out and people are engaging more with that in general.
I think there's definitely lots of areas where a lot of work needs to be done. The unfortunate reality is that women's health has been downplayed for a long, long time. Yeah. And so I think that now with a lot of things that have been going on in social media and, things like podcasts that have been made about people's experiences, during the birthing process. I know like the second season of The Retrievals just came out and that also raised a lot of awareness. So people, I think, are really starting to pay attention to something that we've been ringing the bell about for a long time. So it's nice to sort of see other people sort of pile on.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the content that's here, main stage presentations, some highlights for you?
We opened the meeting with our Gertie Marks research presentations, and we wanted to do this because the Gertie Marks presentations have a very long tradition and history, with Gertie Marks being the mother of obstetric anesthesia. But it was always the presentations of like what's coming down the road, right? So not necessarily what's here right now, but what is going to be in 5 or 6 years, potentially new things that are going to be coming out to impact our practice. And so we had some amazing presentations looking at relationships between magnesium and postpartum hemorrhage. We had another presentation looking at the associations between gestational thrombocytopenia, which is, low platelet counts in mothers, and obstetric hemorrhage, which that relationship has always been, is it real? Is it not real? Do we need to worry about it? Do we not need to worry about it? That was really interesting. And then we had an amazing presentation looking at immunotherapies or potential immunotherapies in postpartum hemorrhage, which is a potential new avenue to manage the scourge that is postpartum hemorrhage. They took, muscle samples of the uterus, and they showed women without hemorrhage and with hemorrhage, and they did these really fancy immunohistochemical stains to show all the different types of white blood cells and how the patterns are floridly different between women who had regular uterine contraction and women who have a condition called uterine atony, where the uterus does not contract well, and when the uterus doesn't contract, you have excess bleeding. And so no one's ever really considered the immune system to be a player in this space. So the fact that there's a potential signal may mean that in 5-6 years' time, there's a new therapeutic that could be developed. So those are the kinds of things that the Gertie Marks presentations are about. And we really wanted to put that first so people could get really excited about having those sorts of discussions. She did an amazing job talking about workforce issues and that. And then we had the president's panel. And what I really liked about the panel was the theme of the meeting is sort of like translational things. So how do we take the research that we talk about in Gertie Marks and things like that, and actually how does it get to the bedside? And they had a really interesting panel talking about how our guidelines are developed, how the treatment recommendations are made, and how those things sort of stand the test of time and what the evidence is behind those guidelines, because we want our guidelines to be updated every 5 or 10 years. And I said, okay, well, what happens in 2015? You come out with a recommendation. And then in 2020, it seems like almost 30 to 40% of the time, those recommendations fall away.
Yes.
And what is the reasons or rationales behind that? And it's because the reality is that many of our guidelines are based on consensus opinions and very, very small trials. The ones that are based on large randomized controlled trials, high quality evidence, those tend to stay, but the other ones tend to fall away. Yeah. So it was sort of, how do we have good research that we can all lean on to really inform our decisions to make our clinical guidelines? And that was most of what we did yesterday. Obviously, we had other presentations as well. And then we had the Fred Air lecture. So we had Dr. Akush come, and she spoke of her experience in public health and advocacy and those kinds of areas too, which is always interesting to hear. The Fred Air lecture is always, it's like for any developing obstetric anesthesiologist, a look at like what your career could look like. And so each year we have somebody who is in the latter part of their career. It's almost like a lifetime achievement award to some. Sometimes we have people like this year was someone who really went into clinical care and then sort of veered off into public health. Sometimes we have people who are straight clinical, and they give, Dr. Scavone a couple of years ago gave a Fred Air that was absolutely phenomenal. I'm like, okay, if you want to be a clinical anesthesiologist, this is what your career could look like. That's always fun to look at. And it's always inspiring as well. Usually leave those lectures being like, oh man, I can't wait. And then today we have a lot of really cool main stage content, a maternal mortality panel, which, just finished up. And then in the afternoon, we have one of our split sessions. Traditionally, there have been sort of not two camps in SOAP, but there's some of us at the SOAP meeting who really are like research minded and some that are more clinically minded. So that is sort of how we've split the tracks this afternoon. So this afternoon, upstairs, we have the Research Network Symposium. So SOAP has a network of research institutions that they all sort of get together and talk about what projects that are ongoing and what kind of things they want to get started. And then downstairs on the main stage, we have clinically oriented lectures on things like updates in postpartum hemorrhage, clinical guidelines that have changed, areas in therapeutics. We have an amazing, what will be an amazing talk, one of our first talks on fetal surgery.
Speaking of hot topics in anesthesia.
Yeah, that's going to be really, really cool because that's an area where we're being asked to weigh in because obviously when you're doing fetal surgery, you have two patients, right? You have the mother and you have the fetus, and how does that work? And that is an area of medicine that has just exploded in the last 5 to 10 years. And so they're looking to us to be the experts in a new field that didn't exist. So how do you do that? Because none of us really had training in that sort of stuff. So that's going to be something that hopefully our members will like, because then they can feel more confident when they're asked to participate in those kinds of surgeries. And so that'll be really, really interesting. And that will sort of take us through the day. And then the abstract presentations,
which is
that's always fun. You never know what you're going to see. Yeah. And again, we broke records. I think we reviewed over 600 abstracts for the meeting, which is just absolutely bananas.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah. It's a ton of work. As chair of the meeting, I get to delegate. And Dr. Farber was head of the abstract. And I was like, I'm so sorry. Here you go. You're going to have to go ahead and do this, and I'll see you later. But her group did an absolutely fantastic job. And so that's really where you get like something that you would never even think of sort of comes up, and it's a great place for discussion.
And you've got right down to medical students presenting. I know Mary Meng, we met earlier, has a medical student here. I think there are others, and then residents and then some senior researchers as well.
Yeah, everything from first and second year medical students who have involved in projects, and they tend to be more the abstract presenters, all the way up through full-fledged professors who are going to be presenting as well on key reviews or big research projects that are very large amounts of funding behind them. So everything in between.
Yeah. It's great. You can just see that there was so much intentionality that went in and thoughtfulness to this meeting to really address kind of all the different issues that are happening now and really working towards that engagement. So kudos to you, because it's hard to do.
Yeah, thank you. No, I mean, look, I had very, very fortunate. I had a huge team of people helping me out. We have the whole AMLE committee, and then our committee has subcommittees. So we have a whole subcommittee where they just one subcommittee just focuses on what's going to be the curriculum for the main stage. We have a committee that organizes everything in the exhibit hall over here to make sure the flow is good. And we have a subcommittee that does all the CME work. And we have a committee that does the abstract review. So it's a lot to organize. But I mean, we've got probably 100 plus people working on this meeting, over the course of time for the year.
So if people want to find out more about the meeting, what took place, any kind of, are they have opportunities to read any of the abstracts or hear any of the lectures, or how is the content kind of maintained after the meeting?
Yeah, so we have obviously soap.org. We have our website. People can go on there and click, and some of the things will be open to the public. Some of the things will be behind the firewall for members only. SOAP members will have access to not just the abstracts for this meeting, but historical, abstracts that were in prior meetings as well. And then we have essentially the recorded CME content that will be put out there as well, that people can then, if they couldn't make the meeting, could go and watch and enjoy. And that's
and anyone really can do, like you said, there is some open access kind of content.
Yeah, we're working on what we think would be good to put on there to be public facing, because some of the things, it's important in our world, but does somebody want to read a presentation on using calcium for postpartum hemorrhage? It's not so applicable to the lay public necessarily. But then there are topics that we do have lectures on that are very patient facing. Like the panel that we had on maternal mortality. Even though there is a lot of data in that of why it's happening, I think that is a very good thing for the lay public to know about, and it's good to get that sort of information out there.
One of the things I bring up a lot is that this is a room full of experts. There are many people who are researchers and do a lot of work in the space, but a lot of anesthesia is delivered it's specifically in the U.S. Mm-hmm. I always say it's the occasional obstetric anesthetist or anesthesiologist. How do you meet the needs of that population?
Yeah, so that's always like the balance when you have some of these meetings, is that you definitely have the tried and trues who want to be on like the bleeding edge of science and obstetric anesthesia research. And then we also have many members who they're like, well, I'm the OB guy in my practice.
Exactly. But I'm doing hearts and guts and everything else too.
Exactly. Yeah. So we try to balance that in the meeting. And that's one of the reasons why, for example, today we have that sort of split track, the more clinically oriented track. We used to have back in the day a whole separate meeting. It was called the Sol Schneider meeting, where it was like a very clinically focused meeting that was separate and distinct from the annual meeting. But it wound up being too burdensome to have two to split. So we sort of molded them into each other. But we definitely have a lot of information for the occasional clinical obstetric anesthesiologist who's just looking for some advice and some help and some
upskilling, keeping their knowledge
Exactly. Not so much for the immunohistochemistry stuff, but for the updated
What should I
postpartum
do?
hemorrhage.
What is my TXA dosing now? Like, how do I do it?
And, what I think is like probably the best example of that is the Ostheimer lecture, which is sort of like the flagship lecture that is at our meeting. And that is literally like what is new in the last year in obstetric anesthesia. So poor soul is I'm doing air quotes, chosen to give the Ostheimer lecture. And they essentially dedicate an entire year of their lives looking through all the literature that is coming out, not just in obstetric anesthesia, though, anything that may relate to obstetric anesthesia. And they sort of gather everything, together, and they do a presentation of like what happened in like the last year and what's coming down the pike. And so in that 1 hour presentation, you get like literally what happened last year. And some of that stuff is a little basic sciencey, but most of it tends to be very clinically oriented.
That's great.
So if you're looking for like a what's new in obstetric anesthesia like lecture, then the Ostheimer, like there's nothing better than that.
That's great. And that goes on the website?
That's recorded?
That is recorded. That one may be behind the members only area.
Yeah.
But, if there's a lot of interests, there's always something that we can work on having it, available outside.
That needs some social media marketing there. Get that out
definitely.
there.
It's
because the people would love that.
Talk.
Well, Dan, thank you so much for sitting down with us. This has been absolutely fantastic. Again, soap.org, right? SOAP.org, finding out more information. The meetings again next year is
in Palm Springs. And then Puerto Rico.
So if people are planning ahead and want to make it to an obstetric and perinatology meeting.
Exactly. Yeah, we've got great locations. So, it's a part. I'd like to say that everyone comes to this meeting because we've got the latest and greatest in obstetric anesthesia.
It's true.
But the fact that it's in a great location and, stuff like that definitely is a draw.
Well, done a phenomenal job. Congrats to you and the board for all the work that you've done.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having this. It was a lot of fun.
And a pleasure. And congratulations on the new role.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Looking forward to interviewing you as VP and maybe president here.
Yeah. It's a 3-year cycle. So you get elected to vice president. And then you do a year as vice president, then a year as president, and then a year as past president.
Well, fantastic.
So then you go home and see the family.
Yeah, exactly. And then and then you go off into the sunset and fade away.
That's right. Well, we'll see you in Puerto Rico when you're president.
Oh, definitely. I'm so looking forward to that meeting.
That's great. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening to TopMedTalk. You can always find us on your favorite social media platform. We're there. If you find us there, give us a like, give us a thumbs up. If you're on YouTube, we always appreciate that for sure. If there's comment, if you like what you hear, if you want to hear more, and we're on your favorite podcatchers. So Apple, Spotify, you can find us just about anywhere. And at TopMedTalk.com. If you go there, you can subscribe to our newsletter. You get that with the EBPOM, Evidence-Based Perioperative Medicine, which we are the broadcasting arm of that organization. You can find out more about all about that. And thank you so much to our sponsors to help TopMedTalk be free and open access to the world. GE Healthcare and Becton Dickinson Advanced Patient Monitoring. You're amazing. Thank you so much.
TopMedTalk.
TopMedTalk is the broadcasting arm of EBPOM, Evidence-Based Perioperative Medicine. Join clinicians from around the world at EBPOM World Congress 2026 between the 7th and the 9th of July at the British Library in London. 3 days of evidence-based perioperative medicine, global insights and expert debate, featuring speakers including Michael Marmot and Ken Rockwood. Go now to ebpom.org. That's ebpom.org.